Good morning. Welcome to the shop. Today I've got a nice project lined up. I'm going to build a crosscut sled. It's something I've needed for a while, and I don't know that I'm going to build the same old crosscut sled. So if you're interested in this, stick around for the build. Now, when making a crosscut sled, essentially all it is a piece of plywood on the bottom with a 2x4 or 2x6 shaped in the front and one in the back. And the reason you have that is when you make the cut the entire way through, it gives it the stability to keep it all together. Now, I built the Matthias Wandel box joint jig some time back, and the shape of the bottom, this is what I'm going to go with. It's exactly what I'm going to go with. So what I've done is I went ahead and just cut the piece of plywood already, and essentially my piece here is going to be, I got 15 1/4 wide and I've got 27 1/2 long. Put a 45 on the corner, make yourself a rectangle, cut off your corner on a 45, and that gives you that shape. That's what we're going to use for this build. Obviously for your saw, you might have a larger saw, you might have wings, you might want it longer. The size is really up to you. What's important is that you have that bracing on the front and the bracing on the back, and that's where we're going to start. One. All right, next we're going to go ahead and joint one side to get a nice squared up side, and we're going to do that with the 6 1/8 inch joiner. We'll do that next. Now typically, a 2x6 is going to be 5 1/2 inches by 1 1/2 inches. Just regular construction grade lumber. Now what I want to do is get the front and the back out of both of these. Most of your stability is going to be in the back. That's your fence. That's what you're getting your accuracy of your cut for. The front piece is just to kind of keep everything together. Now, we don't want it super thin, but we also don't want it overly thick either. The most material that I usually cut, the thicker material, is going to be 1 1/2 inches, or even at 8/4, I would still be below the front fence. So that's where we're going to go ahead and make our cut. The actual size, again, is completely up to you. I'm going with a 2 1/2 inch front, which will leave me 3 inches for the back, and that's what we'll do next. Next step in the process is to go ahead and cut the front bracing, and basically all that is I'm lining it up on the back. Going to pull it out the front. Remember, we have a 45-degree angle cut on that, so all I did was lay this down, and we traced that out on there, and let's go ahead and remove that piece of material. Essentially at this point, you have the jig cut out. Okay, you could just screw it down and you have a crosscut sled, you get your runner, you're done. A lot of people will take this back rail, and what they will do is they'll do a little bit of a detail or a French curve. I actually have a template that my father made. It was one of the pieces that I had gotten from his shop, that I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of a curve. So I have my hands a nice place to rest when I'm actually doing the crosscut, and you just line that up on the corner. And now we'll cut them off. We'll do that on the bandsaw. We'll do that. Sanded and cut out the shape of the back. We've sanded, and we've also run a little round over bead just to take the edges off. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to run on the inside edge of the back. We want to run a little chamfer, and what that chamfer is going to do is allow a place for the dust to collect. So you can always register as square as you can off the back. So that's what we're going to do right here, is just go ahead and take a little chamfer on the back just so the dust has a place to go. All Alright, so what makes this one different? I'm going to make some thumb holes. And essentially all it is going to be a relief. I mean, when you use a crosscut sled, you set your hands here where we just cut out, and then you see where my thumb sits? When you're pushing forward, you know, you want to keep your hands back because the saw blade will be in there. So you want to keep your hands back. So I'm kind of looking at this thinking to myself, that's pretty comfortable right there, so I think I'm going to trace that thumb out. And then this side here is somewhere right around here. Alright. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my die grinder and I'm going to cut out a couple holes using the die grinder, just depressions for my thumb. We're going to do that next. Alright, the next step in the process is to go ahead and drill some holes, and we're going to go ahead and attach the front, and we're going to attach one side of the back, and we're going to leave it float free until we do the actual alignment. But before we can do the alignment, we need to also cut the track. So those are the next couple steps. Alright, so we've gone ahead and we've cut our runners. Your runners will be decided by whatever table saw you have, the size. Cut them to fit, but cut them shallow so they actually sit below the surface. You want them to sit below the surface. So what we're going to do, in order to attach these, is we are going to go ahead and I am using little itty bitty nuts that I'm going to set right in the middle of the track here, and what that's going to do is raise them up. And I'm going to run a bead of glue down each of these to temporarily get them in place. And then we will come back with some screws. And the purpose of the glue, or excuse me, the purpose of the washers, the nuts are to actually raise it up so they sit just proud of the table saw, and it allows for a good connection. It'll allow for a good connection to the actual sled. And I'm just going to eyeball that up. I have set my distance to 10 inches using the rip fence to keep everything square. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put my rip fence where I want it. Line everything up, and I'm going to lay it down. Make sure everything's where I want it. When we come back after lunch, I'm going to go ahead and put the screws in. We're going to go ahead and dial in to make sure that it's actually square, and I'll show you how to do that, and that'll be coming up shortly. Alright, runners are on. Let's go ahead and set it in place, and I even got a little wax on the bottom of it. Let's go ahead and set it in place and see how it runs. I think that's fairly good. Alright, next up we're going to go ahead and... The way I square up a crosscut sled is a little different than what most people do. Most people do the 4 cut, or it's a 4 or 5 cut where you spin it. I don't do that. What I'm going to do is I've raised the blade up. I'm going to go ahead and make a cut right through it, and I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop just shy of the back here, And then I'm going to set my square, and I'm basically going to line the square up, referencing off the back till it's level with the blade, and that'll be square enough for me. Chances are I'm not going to be cutting anything that wide in that 15-inch range on this. It's not a panel saw, so typically you're going to be cutting that 4 or 5 inches or even less. So as long as I'm square with this, it's going to be good enough for me. So let's go ahead and do that now. There it is, Crosscut Sled. It's the most in-depth video I've done for 3 pieces of wood. 3. Pretty simple. Piece of plywood. Front doesn't have to be perfectly square. Back is what matters when you're registered to your blade. Again, I just used a simple square pressed up against the blade and to the back when I made that adjustment. Again, for me, most of the time, I'm only going to be cutting that, an inch to 5 or 6 inches at the most. So, but there it is. Throw a little wax on the bottom from time to time. Great crosscut sled. Thank you everybody for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. Leave comments, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.